Recipes for Grief, heartfelt storytelling for feely foodies. I'm your host, Andrea Sexton Dumas. Joining us today is Kashina Bugayong, my cousin. You can tell we're besties at the amount of shared giggling as well as the amount of shared tears. Kashina shares about a major car accident and near-death experience when she was 12 years old, as well as the foods that nourished her through that time. We touch on the topic of gumbo, which I think we could have gone on and on about but didn't. Honestly, we might have to have a dedicated episode to all things gumbo. Kashina Bugayong is a wife and mother of 2 humans and 1 fur baby who is learning to navigate life with love and intention amidst the chaos. Kashina, thank you so much for joining me on Recipes for Grief. You are my first official recording, so congrats. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This is exciting. I'm excited.
Thank you. I am too. The first question I ask every guest is, how have you been sleeping recently?
Well, now that my son sleeps in his bed all night, very good.
Thanks to Mochi Dog. Tell us about this.
I know. So my sweet boy, who, we had a really rough 2021 because there was a lot of transition. He was only 2.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of change. We left South San Francisco. We moved in with my mom for a little bit. And then we moved into our new house. And he had a really rough transition. He's very much a child of schedule and routine. And he, from the day we left, which was May 31st, 2021, till 3 weeks ago, did not sleep in his bed. He did not. Every morning, between 1 and 3 o'clock, he would make his way into our room. And I was not getting sleep. I was a zombie. Somebody told me that it was the equivalent of, they use that for torture.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, the fact that you haven't lost your mind, and it's been almost 2 years, is remarkable. I was like, well, I can't lose my mind because I have 2 kids to raise. So I can't really, that's not an option. So I asked him, what's wrong? Why aren't you sleeping in your bed? And he's like, because I'm lonely. Why are you lonely? I was like, everybody's in the house with you. Like, we're all sleeping. And he's like, well, mommy and daddy sleep in a room, and then Mochi sleeps with Bella, but I'm by myself. And I was like, so do you want Mochi to sleep in the room with you? And he said, yeah. And that was it. That's all we needed.
And tell us, what type of dog is Mochi?
She's a rescue, my little coworker. She's a Havanese. At least we think she's a Havanese. So we got her right before the pandemic hit. And I can't see life without her. Dogs, man, we don't deserve dogs.
We don't. We don't. But we do deserve sleep. So it sounds like you're sleeping well, thanks to Mochi.
I can actually do my morning routine, which includes a shower. It's great.
Congrats.
It sets the whole day. I would never think, like, just something simple like that. Just meditate and take a shower, get ready, like, without rushing is the best, like, the simple things.
Yeah. Or the not so simple things.
Yeah.
Taking time for yourself, meditating, having that quiet, that's pretty mage.
Yeah, it's pretty great. I completely forgot how that felt. Changed all of our lives.
In more ways than one. I love that.
More ways than one. I know.
And so for all of our listeners, we are related. We're cousins, but we met as adults. I don't recall us meeting as kids. Do you?
No.
Yeah, if we met, it was inconsequential. So our relationship has been built as adults. And there's a lot that happened before we met that I'm super intrigued by and really curious to know more. Your food and grief relationship, when we started having this conversation, you shared there's something about roti and chai masala.
Yeah. So, just a little bit of background. I grew up, my parents were not together growing up. So, I grew up mainly with the Indian side of my family. And so a lot of my grief and food relationship has to do with Indian food in general. And so, yeah, so I was in a car accident when I was 12. I've been dealing with a lot of that since then. But my roti grief relationship has to do with that car accident.
Mm-hmm.
And it was specifically roti and bhaji, which is like a spinach curry. And I was fed that every single day, what seemed like forever, because I was in the hospital for about 6 weeks
Mm-hmm.
after that car accident. So I was fed that for, I want to say, at least 2 weeks while I was in the hospital, and then every single day
Wow.
for at least 2 months after I
Mm-hmm.
got home, and I was in like home health rehab. So now I can't eat roti and I
Yeah.
can't eat bhaji. Like it disgusts me, the smell of it,
Wow.
the look of it. I never eat it. I don't think
Mm.
I've eaten it since I was like maybe in junior high,
Wow.
I want to say. It just associates me to that part of my life. It's just like my body will physically not care for it. Like it just, there's
Mm-hmm.
nothing that's like, because Indian food is good.
Yes.
It's
The
like
best.
you smell the curry, you smell the spices, and you're just like, your mouth just starts watering. But
Yeah.
specifically for those two things, I just can't do it.
Okay.
And it's so delicious.
Yeah.
But
Do you miss it?
no, I
Yeah.
do not. Because the thing with Indian food, there's so many alternatives that are
That's right.
similar that don't give me that response.
What's the difference between roti and naan? Like this might be naan. What's the difference between roti and naan? This may be a very elementary question,
Yeah,
but
I think it's like I want to say it's the way that you cook it. So roti is very similar to it's basically like a tortilla.
okay.
It's a little more dense. Naan is cooked in like a, from my understanding, it's like cooked in like a clay pot.
Right, like the tandoori oven or something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's in like, yeah. So it's the process is much more involved with naan, and it's a
Mm.
lot lighter. To me, it's more delicious. So,
And so, like, how do you feel about spinach? Are you still able to eat spinach?
I can eat spinach when it's not in the form of bhaji.
Okay. And
Yeah.
so, who was cooking these dishes for you? Let's get into the particulars.
Yeah. So my mom was cooking. I think I want to say my grandmother was too. Because my mom, she was in the car accident with me, so she had a broken arm.
Mm-hmm.
So she was limited on what she could do. So I'm assuming other family members kind of just picked up the slack.
Are you willing to talk a little bit more in depth about the actual car accident?
Yeah. It only
So,
took me almost 25 years, but I'm okay without crying.
well, and you can also cry. That's okay too.
Yeah, so I was 12 years old. Looking back, before I get into it, looking back, it's like if this were the universe's way of diverting your path in life, this was the most extreme way.
Mm-hmm.
So I was 12. This was back when this was 1997. Stockton was building, like, there's a big housing boom. Um, and people were moving out of the Bay Area. And so, my mom had found a house out there, and it was like a new build, it was a beautiful house. And we were on our way to go, I guess, sign the contract or something. I don't know. I was 12. I just went. And so it was August 10th. It was a Sunday. Uh, my mom, I guess this is before cell phones became really popular. So my mom had called my whole family. I guess my whole family was going to go look at houses too, and she told them all to meet us there. I think it was like 11:30 in the morning, maybe by lunchtime. I think we go. We were driving there. It took about a little over an hour. At that point, there was no traffic back then. And so we're driving and I'm falling asleep and I'm in the front seat. And this was back when cars had like the electronic automatic seatbelt.
Yes.
So I'm falling asleep and I remember this car. It was like a Honda Civic 4-door. It had like this pearl green color. There was 4 people in it, and I'm falling asleep and I can see them. And they're like neck and neck with my mom. Like they keep speeding up, slowing down, speeding up, slowing down. And all of a sudden, they just cut my mom off. She's in the fast lane, cut my mom off. And next to the fast lane, there's a hill. And so my mom, she was on cruise control. So when she swerved, she hit the hill. And when she hit the curb and in the hill, she hit her head. So she knocked herself out. And so because the car was on cruise control, the car kept going.
Wow.
So I think the police said it went up maybe 75 feet up the hill. And I was awake through the whole thing. I remember all the windows breaking and I'm like calling my mom. She's not answering. And then I remember the car stops and I'm looking at the sky, still in my seat, looking at the sky. And then all of a sudden the car just starts moving back down the hill. And then the car flips. And when the car flips, I get thrown out. Like I slip from the seatbelt and I get thrown out. And I remember rolling down the hill and it was super hot because it was August. So all the grass was not burning. So I'm like trying to grab onto all the weeds that are dead. Nothing is stopping me. And so I'm rolling down the hill. I land on my back on the shoulder of the freeway. And I look up and the car's, see, I don't want to cry. And the car's coming at me. But at that point, it's like I'm so in a daze that I couldn't move. So I just closed my eyes. And then I just remember all of a sudden, I couldn't breathe. And it was hot. It was so, so hot. I look up and the car is on me. And I hear people screaming and I can't breathe. And I look down and the tire of the car is on my pelvis. And I can't breathe. Luckily, people stopped. They saw the whole thing. And so my mom was still in the car, so they couldn't like just throw the car off of me. So it took about 20 people to lift the car and just move it. You know, at that point, I was still awake. And people came and they covered me up with their like sleeping bag, like they were camping, I guess. They covered me up. And they waited till the ambulance got there. The ambulance got there, and I remember they were like cutting off all my clothes, and I was like, "No, people are going to see me."
Right. I'm a 12-year-old girl. Excuse you.
And yeah, and they're like, "No, we have drapes up," and I look up, and I'm like, "Oh, there's these bright yellow drapes like surrounding me." So, and then that's, you know, they airlifted me to the first hospital with my mom. My mom was right next to me, completely unconscious. The first hospital, they were like, we can't do anything for her. And meanwhile, the EMTs that were with me, they're like, do you have anybody that we can call? Because I'm 12. They can't legally treat me.
Wow.
Without parental consent. My mother's unconscious. So here I am, and I'm in shock, obviously. So they airlifted me to Oakland Children's Hospital, meanwhile, asking for anybody's phone number. And so because my whole family that I remembered their phone numbers, they were all in Stockton waiting for me and my mom. So at that point, I think it's like 2:00 in the afternoon, I want to say. They said the accident happened like around 1. And so they took me to Oakland Children's Hospital, and I was just there. And I remember I was laying there in I don't even know if it was the ICU or ER or what it was, but I remember every now and then they would have to come in and they would have to roll me to my side and change my sheets because I was bleeding so badly and they couldn't do anything.
So at this point, they're waiting to treat you because they need adult consent.
Yeah. Yeah. And they couldn't do anything. So I'm basically just bleeding out.
Wow.
And so they called everybody they could. At that point, I even remembered my dad's phone number. Still awake through the whole thing. I did not pass out at all. I stayed awake through the whole thing. And I still remember like it was yesterday. It wasn't until I think 9 o'clock at night when everybody got home, where they all got phone calls. They all got the same voicemail.
Wow. And yeah, because at that time in 1997, I mean, I don't remember anyone I knew who had a cell phone. I had a pager in 97.
Right.
Yeah. Cell phones weren't common. We certainly weren't using email or text or anything. So you'd have to wait until you got home to check the answering machine, as they were called.
Yeah. So not till 9 o'clock. So I guess everybody went back out to Oakland Children's. I can't remember who got there first. I remember the conversation my aunt had with the doctor. I overheard them talking, and the doctor was like, she's lost a lot of blood. She has a 50% chance of living. She might walk again. She might be able to have kids. We don't know. Everything just depends. That's all I remember from that conversation. And I remember thinking, I gotta get out of here. Like, I'm here I am, like bleeding out, waiting to go to surgery, emergency surgery, hearing this doctor saying I might not walk again. And I'm like, no, I gotta get out of here at 12. Like, I'm not staying here. And so that was the last I remember. And then I remember waking up after they said it was a 13-hour surgery. And everything was torn, ruptured, had a really big pelvic fracture. And I had, holes in my bladder. I had all my reproductive organs were torn to shreds. So they had to rebuild everything. So first surgery was 13 hours. They couldn't even fix my pelvis at that point. They needed to fix everything else internal
first.
Before So they put something, it's called external fixators, where it's like they drill into the bone. And
that sounds painful.
It was really weird. I looked like a robot. It was like these really long screws that came out of my skin, and they held it together with a metal thing. So it looked like, I don't know, like scaffolding kind of. So I was like that for, I want to say, a month. So yeah, it was pretty bad. I was in the hospital for about 6 weeks. Had to learn how to walk again. But I mean, I told myself I wasn't going to be there, so I got out of there.
That's right. And so then meanwhile, all the time you're eating this spinach dish.
Yes. And it was like, I had the hospital food, right? Of course. But then my family would bring in like the bhaji and the roti because it's filling, it is healthy.
That's right.
It'll help, right?
That's right. It's also medicinal. I'm imagining, and you tell me, I'm imagining that there's like ginger and garlic and coriander. Like there's probably a lot of herbs and spices.
What's funny is the bhaji that they were making does not have all that. It has garlic, it has ginger. It does not have any curry powder.
Okay.
I can't even explain it, but it's more Fijian than it is traditional, Indian.
Okay.
India. It's like a Fijian twist on it. So I can't even explain it the way, it's not like sag, like, what you have at the restaurant. With
that's almost what I'm imagining.
No, it's not like that at all.
Okay.
It's like a sauteed spinach. It had potato in it, and it had garlic, salt, ginger. Maybe it had cumin in it. to
Okay.
give it the spice. It was, I don't know, they gave it to me all the time.
Would it
Like,
be served with rice or just with the roti?
with rice too, but they gave me roti because it's easier for me to handle because I was bedridden and I couldn't sit up
Oh,
because of
okay.
my pelvis and my scaffolding. So I wasn't able to sit up, so they would give me the roti so it'd be easier to eat.
Mm.
So the roti was the vehicle.
Okay. And
Yeah.
so at the time, was it a dish that you enjoyed at the time? Like, I'm sure pizza would have been like far more delicious to a 12-year-old, but was it
Mhm.
something like when they would bring it to you, you'd go, or was it kind of like, okay, well, this again? Like, how did you feel at the time about bhaji?
When I was in the hospital, I was like, oh, yay, not hospital food. But it wasn't until, and I remember it specifically because I was still at home. I think it was like a couple months after I got home. My mom made it again, and I was like, no, not this again. I can't do this anymore.
I'm putting my foot down.
It's like, no more. Can I please have something else? And
Yeah.
it was, that was it. That was the last time I had it.
Going back to that time, your mom had been knocked unconscious. How long was she unconscious?
She was out for I think 5 days.
Wow.
She woke up. So she had no idea what happened. She has
Hmm.
till this day. She only knows what happened because I told her. And so she woke up. She told me she woke up in the hospital. Me and her were at different hospitals. She woke up in the hospital. She remembers because she broke her arm pretty bad. I think she had like a compound fracture in her wrist, and her cast was on her chest. And she woke up and she was like, why is it so heavy? And then she realized where she was and she was like, oh my God, where's my kid? And so her freaking out in the hospital, they had to sedate her again because she couldn't
Wow.
get out of the hospital to see me because she
Mm.
was still, I mean, she had bruises everywhere. I think they said that they found her on the dashboard
Mm.
of the car. The fact that she did not break her back or worse
Mm.
is a miracle in itself. So I didn't really get to see her until maybe 10 days after my
Wow.
accident. And yeah, she had no idea what happened. And it sucks because like till this day, she still blames herself. And I'm
Mm.
like, it had nothing to do with her, right? She carried that guilt for a really long time. And I
Mhm.
think she still does. It's been 25, yeah, 25 years.
And so for those 10 days, who was with you at the hospital?
So my mom was dating this guy for a while. He was there. My dad was there. My aunt, my sister, I mean, everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they
Yeah.
took turns. I don't know. I was in and out. They had me on a morphine drip because of my injuries. So I was out of it most of the time. The time I can fully recollect what was happening was maybe 2 weeks later.
And so I know at some point during this experience, you had a near death experience,
Mhm.
like the kind that we may hear about in books or like on that Netflix show, Surviving Death, where you kind of saw yourself. You were hovering outside of your body and kind of watching everything happen. Are you willing to talk about that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Um, and it's funny because I was actually watching that show. I think I want to say it was the first person's near death experience, I want to say, that was very similar to mine. And it's funny because when it happened to me, up until maybe about 10 years ago, I thought it was a dream.
Mm.
It felt like a dream. So I remember I was sleeping. I was, one of the days I was completely out of it. I remember I was having I guess it was a dream. I don't know. I was asleep and all of a sudden I felt warmth. And it was like, I can't describe it. It was a different kind of warmth I've never felt before. And the air was just beautiful. It was like surreal. The air was beautiful. It was crisp and clean, and I just something I've never smelt before. Um, it was warm. Like it was like the air was giving me a hug. It was just perfect. And I remember I was in this field. To the right of me were these big, now that I know what they are, Italian cypress trees. Big, long run. They were gigantic. They were so big. I've never seen them so big. I was on a dirt path and I was surrounded by purple wildflowers. And the sky wasn't blue. It was nothing. So I'm walking and I can't see, I'm walking on this path. I can't see anything to my left. So I'm looking at what I can see, which is the fields and the cypress trees. And I'm walking through the path. And then I come across this bridge and it's golden and it's sparkling and it's beautiful.
Wow.
But you can't see on the other side. There's clouds. It's not like clouds. It was like foggy, but it was also sparkling.
Sparkling
it was
fog.
like it was sparkling fog. There was like these little blue sparkles. So I'm about to, that's where the path ends. It ends at this bridge. And so I remember I look at it and I'm like, oh, this is pretty. And so I'm about to put my hand on the railing of the bridge and I hear a voice. And the voice says, go back. It's not your time. And I wake up and I feel the pressure of the compression sleeves on my legs. So it's, because I can't walk. So I feel it pressing, doing its thing on my legs. And then I look and I see my grandpa, who's passed away now. He's sitting there sleeping. And I'm like, oh my God. And so he wakes up, he's like, what's wrong? And I'm like, I just had the craziest dream. And it's just, looking back, it's like, was that God telling me not yet? Was that angel? Like, who was the voice, right? And yeah, it was very surreal having that.
Yeah. And this feeling of like, it's not your time yet. I know that you were told, you may not walk again, you won't be able to do sports, you probably won't have kids. So can you catch us up on, the way that you rehabbed your body, but then also that like your life purpose, like, you were saying in the beginning, like if the universe was going to detour you off of a path, you have certainly found your path since this accident. So can you tell us how this has unfolded for you?
Yeah. So my dad gave me the gift of basketball. Back then when I was 12, I wanted to get a full ride scholarship to Stanford, playing basketball. That was my goal. But of course things changed. I didn't like the idea of somebody else telling me what's going to happen. So hearing the doctor be like, oh, she might not walk again. I'm like, no, I'm not. No.
You don't tell me what I'm not going to do.
Yeah, I'll tell you what I'm going to do.
That's right.
And so, so I learned how to walk again. It was a process. I had to get used to this new body. I had no muscle left. They had to rebuild my pelvis. So I have, my pelvis is not normal. Learning how to walk and maneuver with a pelvis that is rebuilt is hard. I want to say, okay, so everything happened in August. I learned how to walk again, went back to school in January or December. Meanwhile, they wanted to hold me back here for school. And I said no. So I did all my homework. I did my homework from home. And my mom would drop it off. So I was able to do 8th grade. It was the next fall. I tried out for the volleyball team.
Okay. So going into 9th grade.
Going into 9th grade.
You were trying out for the volleyball team. So within a year, you were ready to play sports again.
I did.
Did you make the volleyball team?
I did.
Yeah, you did.
I did.
That's my girl.
I did. I've been that person for since then, you know.
Yeah.
And it's funny because looking back, it's like, who would have thought like something like that would have just not only changed like how my life, the direction of my life, but
Yeah.
how I approach things, specifically physical things.
Mm-hmm.
So I made the volleyball team the next year. I got taken out of that school for other drama. I went to a different school where I tried out for the basketball team, but they required a physical. Went to my orthopedist to get my physical because he's the one that knew my whole situation inside and out. And he said, no. He said, you cannot play weight bearing sports, because he's like, the way we have to rebuild your pelvis, you will have degenerative arthritis, and you doing weight bearing sports will accelerate the arthritis. So he did not clear me. And that's where my basketball dreams were shattered, which meant I couldn't play volleyball either. So that was really hard for a teenage girl to hear.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm thinking especially because that was, you know, something that you and your dad had in common.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We bonded over. I mean, that's what we want. Whenever I would go to his house, that's what we would watch, and we would yell at the TV together. So, you know, it was hard. It was hard to accept that fact. So I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything until college, where they were like, the only thing you can do is swimming.
Okay.
I was like, all right, let's try swimming.
Yeah.
It did not do well with my hair.
But that's we did not have soul cap back then. That's right.
There was no, my hair was so dry. It was not it. So swimming. So not only that, but the major I had in college, I just couldn't. There was no way.
And what was your major?
Biology. So with my experience, I wanted to go pre-med and become an orthopedic surgeon. I did not do that. I'm still doing science, just not sawing bones. I just couldn't, I couldn't bring myself to do that. Up until, how old was I? 27, 28. I had just started dating my now husband, and he was a total gym rat. And we had just started dating, and he did the Nike women's half marathon without training, mind you. He did not train for this. And
I remember you telling me that when I first met him, and I'm like, wait, what?
Girl, he did that with the full marathon too. And I was like,
goodness.
Who are you? Like, are you
He's in his 20s. That's who he was. He was a dude in his 20s. That doesn't fly anymore.
Now, if you ask him now, he'd be like, nope.
Right.
Nope. But so, you know, he finished the half, and I was like, oh, I'm so proud of you. This is so exciting. Because, you know, the energy of a half marathon, like,
yes.
Oh, that energy, that electricity in the air.
Yes.
When you're running a race, it's like, it's so contagious. So when he finished, I was like, oh, I wish I could do that. And he's like, you know, with all his like Nike women's Tiffany
endorphins.
Yeah. And he was like, why can't you? And I was like, because of everything that happened. And he was like, so he's like, try it. See what happens. So if you don't do it, then you don't do it.
That's right.
He replanted the seed. So I was
That's right.
Why can't that? So I want to say maybe a couple months later, I signed up for the Disneyland half marathon.
Yeah.
Never ran a race in my life, but I went balls to the wall. I signed up for a half marathon, and I did it. I completed a half marathon, and that was my first race ever. I trained for it for, I want to say 6-7 months. I ran it 2 days before the anniversary of my car accident. I think it was like 2013. So it was like 15 years later. that kind of just kickstarted everything after that. I did a couple of 10Ks. I did a 12K last year.
Yeah, full circle. And the timing of your half marathon, the anniversary of the accident, I know that there's a little bit more to this date, August 10th. Would you be willing to share that, alongside all these things that the doctors told you wasn't going to do?
Yeah. Well, okay. So it's a funny story. So not only did the doctors say that, oh, she might not walk again, or oh, she can't play weight bearing sports, but they also said like, oh, she might not be able to have kids because of all of the injuries I had. I was surprised in 2015 that I found out I was pregnant.
It was in January, right?
It
was in January. The four of us went on a hike together. Yes. And it was a steep hike. I mean, granted, like it was a steep hike. And I remember you just being like, God, I am so tired. I can't believe it.
And it was weird because it's like I was in the best shape of my life. So I was like, why am I so tired? Why am I so out of breath? Like, what in the world?
And what was it, a week later maybe that you found out? 2 weeks later.
It was like getting progressively worse. I was like, why am I so tired? It was the first week of February where I was like, when's the last time I had a period? I was like, oh my gosh. And so I got like all these pregnancy tests. And I remember my husband, Jeremy, he was with me at my house. We were not living together at that point. And I went and I was like, I'm going to go take the test. So I went and I took the test. Girl, it wasn't even 10 seconds.
It's like you're very pregnant.
Like 3 minutes. It was not even 10 seconds. It was like, heck of pregnant. And I was like, I started bawling. And I was like, I came out holding the test and he was like, what's wrong? I was like, we're having a baby. Like, everything came full circle. It's like, I didn't know I could have kids, number one. Number two, we weren't prepared. I mean, nobody's ever prepared for children. But
keeping it real.
Yeah. But then it was like, it's funny because here she is. October 1st, she was born. Of course, I had done a C-section. I couldn't have kids naturally. But the August 10th date.
Yes.
It's funny because so I got pregnant with my second, and it just so happened that one of the days that you have to schedule your C-section. It's basically surgery. And so they're like, okay, so these are the dates that we have available, August 8th, 9th, or 10th. And I was like, and I think August 10th. And I'm like, oh, because I chose my daughter's birthday, October 1st, because there was another traumatic situation that happened that day for me. And I wanted to remember that day as something positive and not terrible, right? So August 8th or August 10th came up and I look at Jeremy and I'm like, what about August 10th? He was like, no. He's like, you let August 10th be what it is. So we decided August 8th for our son's birthday, which is, he's born 8/8/18, which of course is around the time where I had my first half marathon, had the car accident. So, big life things have always happened around that date.
Yeah.
Like core memories, right? And so it's interesting that that's kind of where my life's journey has taken me.
And so it's interesting because, this idea of this car accident changing the direction of your life. I know that we've talked about your basketball dreams, and you after the accident had dreams of becoming a surgeon, probably to help children like yourself, right? To give the care that you received. How else would you say that the accident and everything after that changed you and changed the direction of your life? Like, what are the through lines that you've been able to notice so far?
I think it changed the way I look at the world. When you go through things that are hard, that alter your brain, the way you think, trauma, grief, loss, anything, it changes the way that you look at the world. For me personally, I think it's more empathy. I'm a big advocate on telling people, why not you? It's like I almost lost my life. And it's funny because it's something that, you know, my husband is, he's the reason why I say, why not you? And I don't think he knows this. I don't think he remembers that conversation at all.
Wow.
Because it was such a like in passing for him.
Yeah. Yeah. But for you, it was like this definitive moment of like, yeah, why not me?
Yeah. And it's like, you know, and I tell people my story and they're just like, you've gone through so much and it hasn't, you know, of course, trauma can make you go one of two ways, right? You can deal with it and you can use it as something to make you stronger, make your life a little more beautiful, whatever, however you make it. Or you can take it and you can just internalize it and victimize yourself. And I didn't let that happen. I don't want to be a victim. I'm not a victim. Shit happens.
Yeah, true that.
And it's like, you know, it was an accident. That's the point of an accident. It wasn't on purpose. At least as far as I know, right? Like I don't know. So yeah, I think the way it's changed me is just empathy, compassion, strength. It's grown my faith. You know, my faith actually looks a very, very different for me now. My faith is mine.
Yeah.
So if I didn't go through that, I would be a completely different person.
Absolutely.
I probably wouldn't like me if I didn't go through that, because I feel I'm more relatable. Because, you know, life is hard.
Yeah, it is.
If you don't go through hard shit, you don't understand. You can't relate to people. As hard as it was to go through, I am thankful for that part of my life.
There's a couple things I want to say, and I have another question. So because this is the first episode that we're recording, we'll see how things unfold. But it is my plan. It is my plan. We'll see if this actually works. I have a clip of my grandmother, your great grandmother. And she's saying, I saw this video recently. We recently digitized it, and I cannot get this quote out of my head. And she says, life is not easy. You just have to make the best of it. So it is my plan to end the podcast with her reminding us every single episode to just make the best of it.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
And I also just want to say that, you know, you've said this to me. Why not you? Like, that's a part of the reason we're recording a podcast today, cousin. like since we became fast friends, you know, we've just been encouraging each other and cheerleading and super excited about all the things that we're going to do together, including gardening and walking the dogs and hanging out with your kids. And so all these wonderful things. Yeah. And so, you know, anytime I come to you and say, Cuzzy, I have an idea.
You know what I say? Yes!
So like that why not you energy is like so a part of your person. It's a part of your spirit. You know, it's you bring it to the table like, yes, of course, let's do it. You can do it. We can do it. Let's do it.
Yeah. So it's such a simple question, but there's so much weight to it. Is it like, it makes you like, why not me?
Why not? Why not?
What's holding me back?
Usually me.
Yeah.
Okay.
But, I mean, that's what's holding me back. And then he has no idea.
Well, you're going to have to tell him. You're going to have to, you know, because that's the other thing. I feel like sometimes we all influence each other. We all have an effect on each other, and we don't always let the people know, like your words land with me. You know, you say something like, and I believe you. Like, you believed him. You trusted him. You didn't trust them doctors, though. No. And for good reason.
Well, it's funny because, and, you know, getting older and no longer being on the original path that I wanted to be on, and becoming an orthopedic surgeon, I started my career working with a lot of doctors in oncology, and now I'm on the complete opposite end at pharmaceutical. But working with these doctors, I've noticed that what they say is not definitive, set in stone. It is It is a guess, an educated guess, because they are educated doctors.
That's right. Yes, give them the props.
But they wouldn't know. They're not fortune tellers, right?
That's right.
And so looking back, I'm like, y'all were wrong. Like, yes, I have degenerative arthritis. I'm not going to lie, but I do listen to my body. So when, for example, for the 12K, I hurt myself mile 4 and I had to walk the rest. Yeah. And I was so upset. Yeah. And I was so discouraged. But hell, I still finished. Took me forever, but I still finished. I don't remember life without these injuries. It's just life.
That's a part of what I was going to ask you. This 12-year-old Kashina who's overhearing, you're hustling on this conversation and the doctor, well, she can't do this and she can't do that. And it's like, I got to go. I got things to do. Were you like that before the accident? Like, did you always have that kind of like fighting spirit in you?
I don't remember. I feel like my whole car accident was like a whole rebirth of who I am. I don't remember. Wow. I remember getting into a fight when I was 12.
Okay, so maybe you had a little fight, a little spark.
I mean, yeah, that was the only fighting spirit I can remember. Is that girl, man. She made me mad. Anyways, a whole nother thing.
Yeah, we'll save the fights in childhood for a different conversation. Yeah. We know that you cannot eat bhaji anymore. You can't mess with roti. You can do other spinach dishes. You can do other, naan and other bread-like dishes or tortilla-like dishes. What foods bring you comfort today?
Masala chai. So my grandmother, I grew up with her. Me and my cousins, we didn't go to daycares or after school programs. We went to their house. My grandfather dropped us off and picked us up every day. And my grandmother always had hot tea on the stove. And she made it with the loose leaf black tea, the Lipton. You can only get this version from like Middle Eastern stores or Indian stores. I don't even think they sell in Asian stores. It's a specific kind of tea.
So it's different than the Lipton that we get at a regular grocery store.
It is different, yes. Oh. It has a different taste. Can't explain it. I don't know. I don't make the rules.
You just drink the tea.
I just drink the tea. And so she would always have it. And if she noticed that we had like the sniffles or if we had a cold, she would put fresh ginger in the tea. And so I grew up with this tea. And it's served whenever we have, big family gatherings. She would make it just randomly. And it was so comforting, just the taste. And I can still taste it and smell it. And this is how she smelled. She smelled like that loose leaf.
Oh, yeah.
And it was like the cardamom and like the cinnamon, and her purse smelled like it.
Wow.
Because she would chew on the cardamom. So she always had it in her purse. She smelled like this tea, and it was just burned in my head, and always brought me comfort. Even when she passed away, we always had that tea. Because in Indian culture, funerals and all that stuff, that kind of the whole process is I want to say a week, 7 days. So we had like everybody in and out coming over. So there was endless amounts of tea. And I never made it for myself. I've always had it. Somebody's always made it.
Okay.
Until we moved. And I found myself needing that familiarity, comfort. So I went to the Indian store because, we're in a new area. So I don't know where anything is. So I had to like Yelp Indian stores in the area. So I went there, I got everything that I needed, and I made it for the kids, and it doesn't taste the same.
That grandmother hand.
And it doesn't taste, it's exactly how she made it. But I don't know how she did it. Thinking about it, I think it's more the comfort of her doing it as opposed to just the tea itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there was so much love. Like, everything she made. And it's funny because everything she made was so fast. but it was so good. And you know how the older generation,
Absolutely.
they
Yeah.
don't measure nothing. They
No.
just throw it in. They measure with their heart.
Yeah, that's right.
I heard a saying. Somebody said, "Measure until your ancestors tell you to stop."
I love it.
And I was like, "That's hella true." Because you hear, I don't know if you do this, but I'll be like cooking something and I'm just throwing in stuff, and then I hear stop.
Mm.
And I'm like, okay.
I don't hear anything. It's more of just like a feeling. You just put what it feels like, and it's hard to describe, but I can so relate. I can remember when I moved away to college and I would call my grandmother and ask her, well, how do you make this? And I would be on the phone with her and she'd be trying to talk me through it. And I'm like, this is a disaster. Like, this is not working at all.
Yeah. There's no way. And same thing would happen with grandmother, my dad's mom. Same thing. I asked her to help me make gumbo. That was a disaster too. She doesn't measure anything. And I was like, okay, well, never mind.
I guess I'll just figure it out one day.
Well, luckily, Aunt Teresa told me about the mix.
Yes.
Well, that mix is legit. We bought a lot of those. So
yeah,
it's giving me the same feeling. The happiness makes my
That's right. Well, so let's talk about the gumbo. Let's go there since you brought it up.
Okay.
So on your father's side of the family, your grandmother is my aunt, my dad's sister. And she actually, let's just take a moment here because I know that both of your grandfathers passed within a very short time, and your dad all at the same time.
All within a year.
All within a year. And your grandmother just passed away, my aunt, this past year. And so, it's been recent that you made your first successful pot of gumbo. Yeah. And so what did you put in your gumbo?
I had my roux, obviously.
From the packet. So
from the packet.
Yeah, let's tell the people, do you remember the brand?
I think it's Louisiana brand.
Louisiana brand. That's right. You're right. Yeah. So it's Louisiana brand. They sell it at Lucky's. My grandmother, so your grandmother's mother, would order a case from the company directly. This is in the 80s. So they would I can remember this so well. She would write a check to purchase a case, and then you mail the check, and then like a month later, she would get a case of mix. My grandmother, she was 79 when I was born. So she wasn't making roux from scratch anymore. Those days were over. So that taste of the Louisiana brand gumbo mix is the taste of my childhood. And so, when you told me that Aunt Teresa gave you the packet, I'm like, because that's how we make it in our family.
Well, it's funny because from what so it's funny because my memory is of grandmother making it from scratch.
Okay.
With the roux. And that's why it was so confusing to me, because I was like, what? It was so confusing. And then even my dad, he made it that way too. And so from my recollection, I only remembered it from scratch. So when Aunt Teresa told me about Louisiana brand, and then you told me about great grandmother and her buying the packets too, I was like, what? We made this whole time.
Well, and that's funny because it's like every so often I will make it from scratch. Sometimes I like watching cooking competitions. So, you get these people and they make a gorgeous dark roux on the television. I'm like, I want to do that. But then it's also like, sometimes I just want my gumbo in an hour.
Yeah.
I don't want to wait.
What's funny is I did make gumbo, not our family recipe or anything. I found it online and it was like an Instapot version.
Oh.
Did not taste the same.
Fair enough.
It was good.
Okay.
But it didn't give me the feels.
The feels, right.
Yeah. So Louisiana brand is the closest of not from scratch family recipe.
Yeah. That
still gives me the feels, but it's fast.
What did you put in your gumbo?
I put celery, bell pepper, put chicken. I didn't have andouille sausage. I put hot link.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean,
which is a good alternative.
Oh, it's excellent. I wouldn't even call it an alternative.
Oh, really? I feel like it's different. No?
Well, yes, it has a different flavor, but you're getting the deliciousness of sausage with that extra spice. So
Yeah.
it's like whatever sausage you have on hand, use that.
Okay. Yeah. So that's what we ended up doing. And then I want to put shrimp, but my kids are allergic to shrimp. So we couldn't do shrimp. So we just did a chicken sausage gumbo. These kids ate it. They loved it. It was successful first time making easy gumbo.
Yeah. Yeah. More successful than your masala chai.
Yeah, it was actually.
Yeah.
And it's like, man, I really want to perfect that. And it's funny because my daughter is like, Bella is like, she's like, Mommy, can you make it? So she loves it, but it doesn't taste the same to me. So she's always asking me to make it. And I'm like, oh, because it doesn't feel, it doesn't give me the feels. I'll make it for her, but I won't drink it.
And so have you tweaked it at all to see if you can get like what are you doing? Like I'm like, okay, let's workshop this now.
Yeah. You know, the loose leaf tea, you boil it in water. I'm thinking of watching the way my grandmother did it. So she would boil the water, throw the tea in, and she would let the tea cook in there. And she would just boil it. And then she would add the milk, and then she would add hella sugar. And then the cardamom and the cinnamon and like all of the, I think it's cardamom. It's just cardamom and cinnamon. And she would just let it cook, and then she would turn it off. And then she would just use a strainer because the loose leaf was still in there. And then she would just put it in a cup and she would give it to you. And I do it exactly that way.
I'm like, is it the water? You know, I'm like, what?
No, I tried different water, tap water, the filtered water from the fridge, the bottled water. I've tried it all. And I'm like, I even like, what kind of milk? Is it 2%?
Right. I'm thinking full fat.
I tried that and it wasn't that. I'm thinking, is it evaporated milk? Did she put condensed milk that I don't remember? Like, I'm trying to think of it. And it's just like.
Okay. So let me ask you this. When your grandmother passed and other people were making it for the 7 days after, that did taste like hers, right? It reminded you of hers?
It was similar, but it did not taste exactly like
it wasn't exact. Yeah. I wonder if she had a secret ingredient that she never told anyone.
Probably.
Some people do that.
Grandmothers do it, right? They're like, oh, just do this, this, and this. And then they just completely leave out like the most important part. Yeah.
Right.
One day I'm going to figure this out.
I want you to make it for me so I can help you workshop this.
Yeah.
Not that I know anything about chai.
Yeah, no, come over. We can do this. Let's do this together.
Yes.
And then it's like, I want Bella to have that feeling, right? Like,
well, it sounds like she already has it. Even though you making it doesn't remind you of your grandmother, I would submit to you that when you make it, it reminds her of you.
Yeah. No, that's true.
Yeah.
But I mean, she was only 5 months old when my grandmother passed away. So thank you for putting it into perspective, Kashina.
So your masala chai doesn't comfort you in the way that it used to, even though you still make it for your daughter, which is in itself a comforting and loving act. So what does comfort you these days?
So, and I don't have it very often. There's something called ras malai, which is like a rice pudding. It has cardamom in it and cinnamon. My mom makes it and it's so good. When with each of my pregnancies, she would make it for me, like huge pots, and it was just so good and just and it warms your belly and it just makes you so happy. So definitely that. I think any Indian food, because I don't make it often, but when I do, it feels like childhood.
And so for our last question that I'll ask each guest, knowing that we carry our grief in tandem with carrying our love, what is your life recipe for walking with grief? You know, we've heard about your car accident and your major life direction changeover. You know,
Mhm.
you've lost your father, you know, your grandfathers around the same time, now both of your grandmothers. So, you know, you've certainly experienced some loss, especially recently. What's your
Yeah.
life recipe? How do you care for yourself?
So somebody wise named Andrea, one day she told me to sit with it. You sit with your grief because you can't ignore it. So sit with it. That's it. You just have to sit with it. Grief, the grief that comes from loss never goes away. You just live with it. So instead of ignoring it or pretending like it's not there, you might as well just sit with it because it's going to be there, whether you
It's
like
gonna
it
be
or not.
there.
Yeah. So, I still have my days.
Mm-hmm.
I miss my dad. I miss Emma, who's, one of my best friends that passed away from cancer in 2020. She actually passed away a day before Papa did.
Wow.
Yeah. So he passed away November 12th. She
Mm,
passed away November 11th.
mm.
So
Yeah. How many
they
years
passed,
apart?
he passed away 2012, passed away 2020, 8 years
So
apart.
8 years. Mm.
Both from cancer,
Mm-hmm.
different cancers. But, all the loss I've had in these last 10 years, you can't do anything else. You have to just accept it because it's part of life, right? Like loss is a part of life.
Yeah.
So, why not just invite it in? I take what you told me. I think you told me this when my dad passed away. That's when you had told me that. Yeah. I mean, I still anything that causes grief, right? Not just loss. Anything painful, you still got to sit with it. So that's kind of how I approach it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Mhm. Thank you for sharing it.
And I also this was on my mind earlier. I also just want to thank the people who stopped during your car accident.
Yes.
Bless those people wherever
We
they are
still have those
today.
sleeping bags.
Do you really?
Yeah, one is a Alice in Wonderland. Can't remember. I think one was just a plain black one that had like
Whoa.
flannel on the inside. I never saw their faces.
Mm.
Like the it's funny because the whole journey, I had amazing people who I don't even remember, most of them,
Mm.
that have helped me.
Mm.
And I remember my mom told me, I think she said she wrote Oprah because she wanted to find these people to
Yeah.
thank them. That's how long ago
Right when we would write letters to
Oprah was
television
still on
shows.
TV.
Yeah.
Yes. So one day I would love to, find these people and say thank you.
Mm.
I don't even know if they remember what happened.
Oh, I'm sure they do. I
I
can
mean,
only
do they see?
imagine, driving down the road, seeing this, really intense car crash, and then you pull over to help, and there's a 12-year-old girl with a car on top of her, and the mom is on the dashboard. I could only imagine. I'm sure they think about you. And so
Yeah,
I'm just imagining whether you ever find the individuals or not, that, through the ether, you all are sending each other, kindness and love. I'm sure
yeah.
they think about you. I'm sure that changed them forever too. I just want to thank you so much for sharing your story, sharing your recipes and your grief and your love and your laugh. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This was a great conversation.
Yes,
Made
yes.
me like rethink about a lot of things that I, kind of buried and didn't think
Mm,
about for a while. So it was good.
mm-hmm.
It was a good conversation.
Absolutely. And one last thing.
Hmm.
I don't know the last time I saw Alice in Wonderland, but I know it has to do with a girl going down a rabbit hole and things are very weird and different. And
Hmm.
I'm just thinking about you as Alice.
Oh my gosh.
I'm thinking about like the bridge and you seeing like the sparkly fog and like nothing is what it seems.
Oh my God.
I know. I think we're gonna have to watch Alice in Wonderland with a new lens.
Oh, we just watched it.
Did you really? How does it end?
So we watched not the cartoon. We watched the one with like Johnny Depp. I think it came out, I don't know, like 10 years ago. So it's like the live action version.
Right.
So at the end, she wakes up from her dream and she goes back to reality. So everything that happened in Wonderland was a dream.
Wow. Yeah. Well, maybe that'll be something else that you sit with, is seeing yourself as Alice.
That's crazy. I didn't even think about that. I mean, a lot of how I think and how I approach things, I've learned from you. So,
well, I can't take any credit. Spirit works through me, grandmother, your great grandmother works through me. Our ancestors, work through me. I've told you this before, but I'll say it, in a formal way here. I can remember the conversation I had with your dad when he was getting sicker. And there's a considerable age gap between us. So I called him uncle. And I remember being at his house and us talking about life and spirit and connecting through the ether and connecting through the veil, and telling him about the experiences that I've had with my dad, after my dad died. And, the most important thing was just for you all, his kids, to know that he loved you. And it's like, as long as they know that you love them, they'll feel you. They'll feel your presence. They'll think about you. Like, they'll always remember you. Like, you have nothing to be afraid of, even though death, it's a huge loss.
Yeah.
And I know that he also felt that loss. I know that he wanted to be here, and wanted to be, in your life and in your kids' lives. So
I talk about him to them all the time. So they know who he is. See his pictures and they ask about him, and I want them to remember, and, know, even though he's not here, he's still here.
That's right.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so after he passed away, I think it was like a week after his memorial, I was super sad. I went to sleep, had a dream. I had a dream that I had a phone call. First of all, it was like a landline, which we don't have those.
Keeping it old school. It's back to 1997.
And it was like one of those like beige like phones. It was one of those. So the phone rang and I answer it. We're staticky, and it's like, sounds like somebody super, super far away. And it's my dad. And he's like, "Hey, I just want to let you know I'm okay." Oh. And I was like, "Dad, where are you?" He's like, "I'm here." I was like, "Where, Dad? Where are you?" He's like, "I'm here. I'm fine. I'm okay. I just wanted to let you know." And he was sound so far away and was so staticky.
Wow.
I was like, "Okay." And then I woke up and I cried. So I don't know if I ever told you that.
I'm pretty sure you did, but I love hearing it again.
Yeah. But yeah, so I miss him. I
know you do. Kashina, thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Yes,
this is awesome.
This has been wonderful. Thank you for listening to Recipes for Grief. You can find more information about today's guest on the podcast page of your player, as well as their recipe card that's available on my website, AndreaSextonDumas.com. That's AndreaSexton, D as in donut, UMAS.com. If you'd like to share your recipe for grief, leave a 3-minute voicemail at the following number, and your message may be played on a future episode as a listener shout out. That number is 510-426-6041. That's 510-426-6041. Find me on Instagram and TikTok at Recipes for Grief. And now, here's a little advice from my grandmother.
Life isn't easy. You just have to make the best of it.